966.
Some of our listeners and viewers may recall, we had Prince Walid bin Nasser Al Saud for episode number 65 last November of the 966. Prince Walid is founder and CEO of Mukatafa, which is, and that was a really extremely interesting discussion. And in large part, not only is Prince Walid, when we talked about, he's up there in competition with some of the most interesting men in the world. But Mukatafa is interesting because it's bringing a whole new approach, and it's trying to gain greater efficiency in the Saudi economy. And if you recall, it's essentially trying to forward collaboration and integration between the public and private sectors. It's set up associations. It already has dedicated sector associations for grocers, for restaurants and cafes, from manufacturers, vendors, and also the fashion, jewelry, and beauty industry. And they're bringing more on. He's got a background. He had a long background with McDonald's. He understands markets, and he understands the strength and value of sort of collaborative advocacy. So that's why he's organizing these sectors, and that's why these sectors are coming to him and Mukatafa to say, help us. So I bring him back up, and also Mukatafa, because they just published their first study. It's called The Impact of Cross-Border E-Commerce in KSA. It's a collaboration they did with management consulting firm Kearney. I always say Kearney. Is it Kearney?
I think it's Kearney, but I don't know.
I think it's Kearney.
Yeah.
It's well known, so I may have been mispronouncing it all these
40 years in the kingdom, I think, is how long they've been there.
It's well established and globally too. But it's a perfect example of what Mukatafa is trying to achieve. It identifies the key sector, e-commerce, gathers data, analyzes the results, and then offers recommendations for policy changes that would contribute to a more robust local economy, and jobs, upskilling, diversification, any number of things that are critical to Vision 2030. But so I'm not going to go in depth on the study, because I'd actually like, and I've already sent a note to this effect, for Mukatafa or Kearney expert to join us on the 966 to talk about it. But I will briefly share the findings because they're interesting. So again, this is cross-border e-commerce, and I just gave away one of the major plot lines. The study found that in 2021, the e-commerce market in KSA constituted about 6% of Saudi Arabia's overall retail sector. So that overall retail sector was 92.5 billion in dollar terms. The e-commerce side of it was about 5.5 billion. It projects out that this e-commerce segment will grow to about $9.25 billion and 7.6% of the total retail market by 2026. The problem here is, and this is really valuable info, is that the cross-border e-commerce, so this is e-commerce. So, if you buy something online, there's cross-border. So someone in Saudi is buying it from some other e-commerce thing outside of Saudi Arabia as opposed to local. I mean, it's obvious, but that's basically what we're talking about. Cross-border e-commerce accounted for 59% of all KSA e-commerce revenue. This is the third largest of cross-border activity of the close to 60 countries that this study benchmarks. So it's a large number. And the primary reason for this, according to the study, is that cross-border players have a price advantage on same quality products due to differences in the cost of doing business. And I'm going to quote here, because this is sort of the heart and soul of it. Quote, local players have 17 to 26% higher like-to-like cost of servicing than their cross-border peers. Cross-border e-commerce players are only subject to customs duties on shipments valued over SAR 1000, which is about $267, are not subject to VAT, corporate taxes, zakat, and quality compliance certificate and permissions, which local companies have to comply with. The consumers see this translating into a price gap, which is the key driver to prefer cross-border. Obviously, if it's cheaper, you look at this, and it's more compelling. So it lays out the context, and it goes into detail on why this is happening and that sort of thing. But then the study closes with 4 specific recommendations. to create a level playing field. And this is starting with reducing that $266 minimum duty threshold for cross-border e-commerce. That number, 266 as being your minimum, is actually higher than 90% of the countries that were benchmarked in the study. So I'm not going to go further into it because take a look at it. It's not long. It's well done. It's easily accessed. But I wanted to shine a light on this because this is a milestone for Mukatafa. This is part of their plan. They wanted to be doing sector studies and industry studies. This is their first one, and it's well done. We want to celebrate and promote that they are taking a new and what seems to be a successful approach to achieving an optimal relationship between the private sector and public policy in Saudi Arabia. And this study is one tool. It's a good example of how it goes about its business. So, here's to you, Mukatafa. Congrats. I know you've been talking about this study and it's out, and I hope it gets legs, and it's certainly a contribution to what you're trying to do, which is to bring private sector and public policy closer together on key sectors. And obviously e-commerce is a key sector.
Richard, there is a 100% chance that I will be including a link to this in the show notes on both the podcast platform and on YouTube. This is a really good one. And I'm kind of glad that we're leaving some of the details of it to be discovered, because I've only read a report about the report, and I'm looking forward to actually getting into it, because these guys do really good work at Mukatafa, and that they've sort of done a JV here, or a partnership with Kearney, is really cool. I just two points. The first one is Prince Waleed, one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet in your life, and Razan Al Hanouf, just true professionals. They're building one of the best businesses in Saudi Arabia with Mukatafa. It's just impressive, an impressive shop.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt, Razan and Al Hanouf are authors of this, co-authors of this study.
Yep. And Razan was just made a partner in the firm. So mabruk to them for getting this out. And this is a really important segment for Saudi Arabia. We actually do touch a little bit on e-commerce with Iyad Al-Bayouk in our conversation with him in just a few minutes. But I just thought that this was really interesting, Richard, because they talk about cross-border e-commerce, but they also talk about the e-commerce market in general. It's 6% overall of the retail market in Saudi Arabia, and it's expected to grow to reach 7.5% by 2026. That's really interesting because in the US, e-commerce is 14.7% of the total market. So more than double. And as of June 2022, Amazon accounted for 37.8% of all e-commerce in the US, which is staggering. I mean, that is huge. So it sort of shows that Saudi Arabia is going at its own pace with this, but also that Saudis like to shop in person more, which is interesting and anecdotally seems true to me. So this is just a really cool study for them, and I think they have more coming as well. I think this isn't the only iteration, unless I'm wrong about that. Absolutely,
and that's why I want to get on their train with the experts with each one study and bring them on the 966. But three thoughts. One, they sort of announced it and put it out there through LinkedIn, so you can find it on LinkedIn, Mukatafa, Mukatafa. And you can actually download it from there, which is what I did. Two, e-commerce, as we know, got a great boost from the pandemic, and absolutely right. Saudis traditionally like to shop in person, and have traditionally used cash. So it's changing some cultural habits. But it's got a boost from the pandemic, and obviously it's being pushed in terms of digital initiatives on the part of the government. And three, Amazon constitutes about 95% of the purchases in this household. it's crazy.
Richard, I think you know this about me, but I strongly dislike buying anything in person. Even if it's like something where you physically have to go and get it, I like to buy it online and then go get the curbside pickup or whatever if it's available. I really don't like wandering around stores, and I always feel like I'm not getting the best deal because I can't really compare merchants or whatever. It's just like, oh, this is what you're selling. Like, how do I know it's not going to be cheaper next door? So it's always shocking to me when people are like going to the mall to buy something, because I'm just like, what are you buying? What is it?
100%. it seems like they're like, for me, they're like daylight to a vampire. I don't want to go in there. And if I do, I feel like I'm wasting my time, even if I'm going directly to get something and get out, which is the way guys typically shop. But,
Yes.
um, and on top of that, as someone who keeps the books in my house, if you go to these places, they're just enticements to buy stuff,
Yeah.
most of which you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
So why put yourself through that? No, so I'm with you 100%. I also don't like to carry cash. So I'm constantly don't have cash. I need to carry more cash because when I play golf with my buddies, I gotta have cash on hand because I'm paying out.
Because you're paying out on the gambling side of it.
No, I'm paying out on, I lost the, whatever the games were that day. I'm owing people money. So anyway, yeah, I'm with you on that. I've seen no reason to go to a brick and mortar place if you don't have to.
Yeah, and there's a lot out there on Saudi Arabia's embrace of cashless. I mean, it's like cash used to be actually king over there, and now, like, at least the times that we've been there, I haven't needed it at all. And a lot of places don't take it. And I think they tried to. And we should probably get somebody on here to talk a little bit about this, but like I think they curbed it heavily because they wanted to, keep track of the money being spent at some of these local shops and where it gets sent, and remittances and all of that. But I mean, they're just way ahead on it.
Well, on top of that, again, another bounce from the pandemic for the hygienic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting when talking with Iyad, that's one of the things we talked about, how are there new sectors coming up in terms of investment, because so much of the early was on this point of sales or um, delivery, e-commerce. A lot, they were sort of a lot of the apps that coming out were in the same sector, and it was in that area. But yeah, it's changing and changing fast, and I'm like, we're certainly examples A and B of people who prefer a cashless society.
Yeah. The only problem with buying everything online is you get everything delivered in boxes, and then the boxes just stack up so high. And I know my wife and obviously my infant children are not breaking them down. So you called me the other day, Richard, and you were like, "Hey, did I catch you at a bad time?" And it sounded like somebody was ripping apart another human being. I was like, "No, I'm just breaking down one of the 50 boxes that is preventing me from parking in my garage." So I'm sorry about that.
You do. I was talking with my daughter. We were talking with my daughter the other day, and same thing. You and I do the same thing. It seems a waste of time to have a phone call and not be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that conversation with you, but I realized sort of how noisy it is that I've been doing all this time. I'm doing crud when I'm on the phone. My daughter was cleaning up the room, moving around, and then I'm calling you. I thought you were in the kitchen, but I guess you were deconstructing boxes.
I was deconstructing boxes. It's funny. We're the same way in that respect, because anytime I'm on the phone, I get up and start walking around. I don't know why I do that, but it really annoys my wife. And I'm like, well, I just can't not. And so the podcast is difficult for me. That's why I'm pointing in every different direction and unplugging cords constantly. I don't know why, but yeah.
I've infected my kids. Sam occasionally will see him walking around the backyard. I go, "What's he doing out there?" "Oh, he's on a call. He's just walking and talking."